Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan from NotJustCute.com, and this is First Friday Q&A for September. I've got three great questions to get to today, so I'm going to jump right in. The first one comes from an Amanda also. She says, my little boy is about to turn 2. He's not really talking much. He says single words, so when he gets frustrated, I find it difficult to find out what the problem is. He gets so frustrated that he bites his own hand and arms really hard. I've tried getting him to show me what he wants, but he doesn't understand. I have made what I call a calm down spot, where if he's frustrated, he can go and sit and calm down, but I think he feels like it's a naughty spot, which I've never done, so he doesn't want to go there. When we're out, he's an absolute nightmare if there are any kids there. He will hit, bite, pull hair, and hurt them if he walks near them. The only place he is good with other kids is when he's in daycare. I'm trying to find the cause of his behavior, as I know these are all just symptoms of the real problem, but I am at a loss as to how to help him. Any suggestions will be greatly appreciated. Well, Amanda, I think the first thing to consider is with your almost 2-year-old, there's such a discrepancy between his language abilities and his emotional abilities. So his emotion that he's feeling is very, very strong and powerful. But his verbal skills are going to be pretty limited on what he can produce. And it sounds like you mentioned, that he's only talking a little bit. He's able to understand more than he's able to produce. So he does understand more than he may let on. So you talking to him and talking him through emotions and helping to find out what's going on really is going to be helpful. So the first thing to focus on, I think, is building those verbal skills. So labeling his emotions, talking through what he's feeling, helping him to find out what it is that he wants and how to communicate that to you more effectively. So kind of talking to him, asking him questions, but also kind of a parallel talk. So you want this, you want me to come here, can you say help me please, or whatever those words are that he needs, kind of give those to him and help him build that vocabulary and talk about those emotion words. I'm angry, I'm mad, I'm hurt, I'm sad. And to help him build those words so that he knows to use those instead of acting out physically. I mean, you can imagine where he's coming from. If you can just imagine yourself with all the emotions and frustrations and things that you feel and magnify that a little bit more even, and then picture yourself in a place where you cannot communicate at all with the people. You know exactly what you want and what you're feeling, and it's sometimes overpowering, but you can't communicate that to anyone else to get the help that you need. So you can see why he's feeling this intense emotion. If it progresses and his language skills still aren't developing, or if you're still concerned about those language skills, talk to your pediatrician about that. They can do a little bit of an assessment and find out where he falls on the developmental scale. And I'll put some links in here about biting and about language development, that type of thing. The other thing that you mentioned is the calm down spot, and that's a good start, but for an almost 2-year-old, he can't quite understand what the purpose is there. You can't just send him to a calm down spot and hope that that's going to work out. So you'll need to go with him to that calm down spot. He's going to need your help and your coaching to help bring down his frustration. So if that's coming to your calm down spot that you have, or just getting him away from whatever the upsetting stimulus is and helping him to calm down, talking him through that, again, using those words to label and validate his emotions, and help him to calm down. For toddlers, distraction is also a good tool to help calm down, in a sense. So you still want to label, validate the emotions that he's feeling, talk him through that, but then maybe try to move him on to something else to get his attention to go elsewhere. Can sometimes help. The other interesting thing that you mentioned is that he has a hard time getting along with other children, but at daycare he does great. So talk with his providers a bit and talk about what kinds of things they're doing to help him be successful with the other children, and see if there are some things that you can implement there. It may also just be the familiarity and the structure that he finds in daycare is more comforting, and so he might need a little more coaching from you and staying close to him a little bit more when he's out and about around other kids and he might not be as used to. For a young toddler with low verbal skills, which is typical for toddlers, it's going to be very normal for them to act out physically, sometimes aggressively, to try to communicate what they're saying. So understand that it's kind of it is a normal thing at this age. Coach him through to build those verbal skills, label and talk him through what's going on to help build that for the future, and then coach him and help him to calm down and use those positive social skills that he needs to be developing. But he is very young, so it is a typical thing. It's something that you're just going to have to coach him through and guide him through and help him to build those skills. And like I said, get some help from his daycare providers, talk to them and see if you can get some tips there as well. And if you continue to be concerned about his verbal skills, which sounds like they're normal at this point, but if you continue to feel concerned about that, talk with your pediatrician and find out where he falls on that developmental span. So thank you for writing in on that, Amanda. The next one comes from Rebecca, and she's asking about her daughter, who is also 2 years old, who loves dog books but is afraid of them. And Rebecca mentions that she's also afraid of dogs and her husband doesn't like them. So she's asking what she can do to help her daughter not be afraid of dogs. And the first thing that I would think about here, Rebecca, is to consider whether or not this is actually a problem. I think as parents and people that work with children, I think we're often very anxious to fix these problems that sometimes aren't really a problem. So the thing that I usually consider if we're talking about a concern that people have is to consider whether or not it's actually a problem for you. So usually that comes down to whether it is affecting your daily life or your important relationships. So if she's simply afraid of dogs, just kind of nervous around them, that's a normal thing. I wouldn't worry too much about. In fact, I would consider a little bit, there's a book called The Gift of Fear, and consider a little bit that having a little bit of a fear of dogs is something that protects us and keeps us from getting into risky situations sometimes. But if it progresses towards interfering your daily interactions, so if you can't even go out to the park because if someone shows up with a dog, she's going to fall apart, then that's maybe a concern, a problem that we'd want to address. Or if it's so severe anytime she sees a dog, that would be something that I would consider a problem. Or if it's affecting important relationships. So if grandma has a dog, but your daughter's afraid to go there because she's so afraid of that dog and it's beginning to affect that relationship. So consider, first of all, the severity and the way it's affecting your life and your relationships to consider how important this problem is. But at that point, if you're wanting to help her get more comfortable with dogs, you want to start with some representational types of things. So pictures and books and stories, like you mentioned, maybe even watching some movies with a positive dog character. And then moving on, like you said, you mentioned that you have some friends with dogs, and so you've tried to help them build some positive experiences with dogs for your daughter and for yourself. And that's a good idea too. Just don't push too hard. Give some space and time, especially right now for a 2-year-old. The dog, often if it's a larger dog, is looking eye to eye, and so that can be very intimidating. So, lift her up, give her a secure spot, and just some short, brief, positive experiences with dogs, and that should help a little bit. Now, also consider if her fear comes from a traumatic experience, like a dog bite or attack that either happened to her or that she witnessed, or for you yourself, if that's where your fear comes from. Those traumatic experiences or a very extreme response to dogs, that might be something that would warrant talking to some clinical professionals about how to deal with those types of things. But again, like I said, first decide whether or not this really is an important enough problem for you, if it's really affecting your life or if it's severe enough. And then just give it some room and some space and some time with some positive experiences, and hopefully that will help out a little bit with that. The last one comes from Tina, who is asking for resources to help her 5-year-old, who she says is such a bundle of dramatic emotion at times. She wants to teach her that it's okay to feel negative emotions like frustration and anger, but that there are appropriate ways to handle those. And that's so great, Tina. Is a really wonderful thing to teach children. It's a skill they need to have. So I think you're right on the right track. You want to label and validate emotions, but help them to learn positive ways to deal with them, positive problem-solving techniques. So one of the great ways to do that is to use stories and experiences to talk through some social problem solving, to label those emotions and talk through positive ways to handle them. So I'm going to put a link down here with a link to a resource that has a lot of different books that address a lot of different emotions. And so you can use those perhaps with your daughter. Look up some of these stories, bring them home and read them and talk about them. Label the emotion, validate why they feel that way and that it's okay, and then problem solve before you get to the end of the book. What could this character do to handle this in a positive way? It's a lot easier for young children to do social problem solving when they're removed from the actual emotion of the situation. So they can just be a spectator and see it in the story, see what the emotion is, label it, give a valid reason for it, and then help that character to problem solve and move through it in a positive way. That will help your daughter a little bit in handling her emotions positively for herself, because she'll be able to label it, feel validated, and move on to positive problem solving skills. So I'll put a link here again for that list of books. And if anybody else has some great resources for helping children to label, validate, and positively handle their emotions, I would love to have your input there as well. If you have a question for next month's First Friday Q&A, you can send those to questions@notjustq.com. notjustcute.com. I'd love to hear your questions and work those into some Q&A discussions here next month, or also work them into some full-length posts. So I appreciate you reading. I appreciate your input and helping me to understand what types of things you're interested in, and keep this discussion purposeful and meaningful for you. Hope you have a great Labor Day weekend, and I will see you back here at notjustcute.com. Thanks for reading and thanks for watching. We'll see you next month.